In 1969, humanity achieved what many thought impossible. We stood on the surface of the moon, guided there by computers with less processing power than today's digital watches. The Apollo guidance computer, responsible for navigating astronauts across 240,000 miles of space, had just 64 kilobytes of memory. Your smartphone is roughly 100,000 times more powerful. Yet here we are over 5 decades later, struggling to return. The contrast is striking. We carry supercomputers in our pockets, manufacture revolutionary materials, and have mapped the human genome. But sending people back to the lunar surface has become an elusive goal, plagued by delays, budget overruns, and technical challenges. So what changed? Why was the seemingly impossible achievable then, but the seemingly straightforward so difficult now? The answer lies not in our technological capabilities, but in our priorities. At its peak in 1966, NASA commanded 4.5% of the federal budget, 10 times higher than today's 0.4%. The Cold War space race created political will that translated into unprecedented funding and urgency. When President Kennedy declared, "We choose to go to the moon," it wasn't just inspiration, it was backed by resources to match the ambition. Today's Artemis program tells a different story. The second mission, originally scheduled for November 2024, has been pushed to April 2026. Technical issues with Orion's heat shield, life support systems, and emergency batteries have caused significant delays. Meanwhile, the SLS rocket costs a staggering $2 billion per launch, with total program costs approaching $50 billion. But what if there's another way? What if the solution isn't NASA's massive SLS rocket, but SpaceX's proven Dragon spacecraft? Elon Musk 24 hours. Let's dive right in. The Artemis program's struggles go beyond just budget constraints. During the Artemis 1 mission in 2022, NASA engineers discovered something deeply concerning. The Orion spacecraft's heat shield experienced unexpected charring and material loss in over 100 locations. This isn't just a minor technical hiccup, it's a critical safety issue that could put astronaut lives at risk during the fiery re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. For months, NASA engineers have been working around the clock to solve this problem. Every test, every modification adds more time to an already delayed timeline. And the heat shield is just one of many technical challenges facing Artemis. The spacecraft's life support system, the very technology that will keep astronauts alive in the vacuum of space, passed tests for Artemis 2, but failed during Artemis 3 testing. This inconsistency raises serious questions about its reliability for long-duration missions. When your life depends on equipment working perfectly, mostly reliable isn't good enough. Even the side hatch, which seems like a straightforward component, has become a headache for NASA engineers. It needs to open flawlessly in various emergency scenarios. Scenarios where seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Then there's the emergency batteries, which have been underperforming in tests. These batteries aren't a luxury, they're a critical backup system if the spacecraft needs to separate from the rocket during an emergency. Every component that fails testing adds more delays, more costs, and more uncertainty to the Artemis timeline. Speaking of costs, the numbers are staggering. Each SLS rocket launch costs American taxpayers approximately $2 billion, making it the most expensive launch system ever developed. Since 2011, the SLS program has absorbed $23.8 billion in development costs, while Orion has added another $23.4 billion since 2006. Add another $5.7 billion for ground infrastructure improvements, and the total Artemis-related spending approaches $50 billion. And that's before we've even sent a single human back to the lunar surface. This combination of technical challenges and astronomical costs has many space experts looking for alternatives. What if there was already a proven spacecraft that could be modified for lunar missions at a fraction of the cost? Enter SpaceX's Crew Dragon. You've seen it in the news, the sleek capsule that's been ferrying astronauts to and from the International Space Station since 2020. Unlike the Apollo command module of the 1960s or even NASA's Orion, Crew Dragon represents modern spacecraft design at its finest. The differences between Crew Dragon and Apollo are striking. While Apollo astronauts navigated using primitive computers and manual controls, Crew Dragon features sophisticated touchscreen interfaces and autonomous docking capabilities. Its digital flight software performs thousands of calculations per second, making split-second adjustments that would have been impossible during the Apollo era. Inside, Crew Dragon offers about 50% more pressurized volume than Apollo's command module. This isn't just about comfort, it means more space for scientific equipment, supplies, and room for astronauts to work effectively during multi-day missions. The environmental control and life support systems on Crew Dragon are also generations ahead of Apollo technology. Modern air filtration, precise temperature control, and advanced carbon dioxide scrubbers create a safer, more comfortable environment for astronauts. So could this proven spacecraft, which has already safely carried dozens of astronauts to orbit, be modified for lunar missions? The technical challenges are significant but not insurmountable. The first major hurdle would be radiation protection. In low Earth orbit, where Crew Dragon currently operates, astronauts benefit from the Earth's magnetic field, which acts as a natural shield against harmful cosmic radiation and solar flares. Beyond this protective bubble, radiation exposure increases dramatically. Apollo astronauts accepted this risk for their brief lunar missions, but modern safety standards are much higher. To address this, SpaceX would need to incorporate additional radiation shielding into Crew Dragon's design. This could involve adding protective materials to the spacecraft's hull or creating a dedicated storm shelter within the capsule where astronauts could retreat during periods of intense solar activity. The second challenge involves life support. Crew Dragon's environmental control and life support systems are currently optimized for short-duration missions lasting days, not weeks. A lunar mission would require enhanced carbon dioxide removal, more efficient water recycling, and additional storage for consumables like food, water, and oxygen. SpaceX engineers would also need to upgrade Crew Dragon's propulsion system. The spacecraft currently uses Draco thrusters for orbital maneuvers, but reaching lunar orbit requires significantly more delta-V, change in velocity. This could be addressed by adding more powerful Super Draco thrusters, originally designed for launch abort scenarios, and increasing propellant capacity. Perhaps the most daunting challenge would be re-entry. When returning from the International Space Station, Crew Dragon enters Earth's atmosphere at approximately 7.8 kilometers per second. A return from lunar orbit would involve re-entry speeds exceeding 11 kilometers per second, generating much higher thermal loads. This would require significant reinforcement of Crew Dragon's heat shield to withstand the increased temperatures. These challenges have led some experts to suggest that rather than modifying Crew Dragon, SpaceX should focus on developing a purpose-built spacecraft specifically designed for lunar exploration. Starting from scratch would allow engineers to design for deep space conditions from the beginning, rather than adapting a vehicle optimized for low Earth orbit. This is where SpaceX's other breakthrough project enters the picture: Starship. Unlike Crew Dragon or NASA's Orion, which requires a separate landing system, Starship is being designed as an all-in-one solution for deep space exploration. With its massive 50-meter height and 9-meter diameter, Starship offers an internal pressurized volume of 1,100 cubic meters, a veritable space mansion compared to earlier spacecraft. To put this in perspective, you could fit the entire habitable volume of the International Space Station inside a single Starship, with room to spare. This generous space allows for dedicated crew quarters, science labs, exercise facilities, and storage for months of supplies, essential for establishing a sustainable lunar presence. Starship's propulsion system is equally impressive. Its 6 Raptor engines run on liquid methane and liquid oxygen, a more efficient propellant combination than the hypergolic fuels used by Crew Dragon. These engines can throttle precisely for landing maneuvers, eliminating the need for separate descent engines. Perhaps Starship's most revolutionary feature is its capacity. While Apollo's lunar module could deliver only 500 kilograms of cargo to the moon's surface, Starship aims to transport up to 100 metric tons in a single mission. This game-changing capability would allow for rapid deployment of habitats, power systems, rovers, and scientific equipment, the infrastructure needed for a permanent lunar base. The economics also favor Starship. Though development costs are substantial, its fully reusable design promises to dramatically reduce per-mission expenses. Instead of discarding spacecraft components after each use, as NASA did with Apollo and continues to do with SLS, SpaceX plans to refurbish and refly Starships multiple times, spreading development costs across dozens or even hundreds of missions. For a lunar mission profile, Starship would first launch to Earth orbit, where it would be refueled by tanker Starships. Once fully fueled, it would proceed to lunar orbit, land on the surface, support the crew during their stay, and then return them directly to Earth, all without requiring separate transfer vehicles, landers, or ascent modules. This simplified mission architecture eliminates many of the complex docking maneuvers and spacecraft transfers that increase risk in traditional approaches. Fewer components and interfaces mean fewer potential points of failure, a principle that engineers have embraced since the earliest days of spaceflight. In private meetings at NASA, some engineers have expressed frustration with the Artemis program's mounting costs and delays. One senior propulsion engineer reportedly commented, "We're trying to build a 21st century lunar program with 20th century management and procurement approaches." Another flight systems specialist noted, "Every time we solve one problem with Artemis, two more seem to pop up. It's death by 1,000 technical cuts." These sentiments reflect a growing recognition within the space community that traditional aerospace development models, characterized by cost-plus contracts, extensive oversight, and risk aversion, struggle to deliver innovative solutions on reasonable timelines and budgets. SpaceX's approach stands in stark contrast. The company embraces rapid prototyping, testing to failure, and iterative improvement. While this approach has led to some spectacular explosions during Starship development, it has also produced remarkably fast progress. In less than 3 years, SpaceX has gone from early Starship prototypes to successful orbital flights, a pace that traditional aerospace programs can only dream of. Former NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine acknowledged this reality in a recent interview. "The traditional model takes too long and costs too much. We need to embrace commercial approaches if we want to achieve ambitious exploration goals in our lifetime." Even within NASA, there's growing recognition that commercial partnerships represent the future of space exploration. The Commercial Crew Program, which developed Crew Dragon, has been hailed as one of NASA's most successful initiatives in decades, delivering safe, reliable access to orbit at a fraction of the cost of previous human spaceflight programs. Some analysts suggest that NASA could achieve its lunar exploration goals faster and more economically by pivoting to a commercial model for Artemis, purchasing lunar transportation services from SpaceX, rather than continuing to develop its own vehicles at great expense. A recent independent analysis by aerospace economists estimated that NASA could save upwards of $30 billion by switching from SLS to Orion to commercial alternatives for lunar missions. Those savings could be redirected toward developing the surface infrastructure and scientific payloads needed for meaningful lunar exploration, the elements that actually advance our understanding and capabilities. While political considerations make an immediate abandonment of SLS unlikely, the program employs thousands of workers across multiple congressional districts. There's a growing sense that America's lunar ambitions might ultimately depend on commercial innovations like Crew Dragon and Starship. The core question remains, do we prioritize maintaining legacy aerospace institutions and approaches, or do we prioritize actually getting humans back to the moon in a sustainable way? The answer will shape the future of space exploration for decades to come. As we look toward the stars, we face a familiar human dilemma, the tension between tradition and innovation, between established institutions and disruptive newcomers. History suggests that progress ultimately favors those willing to embrace new approaches, even when they challenge established norms and interests. In the words of one NASA flight director who requested anonymity, "I don't care whose logo is on the side of the spacecraft that takes us back to the moon. I just want to see it happen in my lifetime." For a generation that has waited half a century to see humans return to lunar soil, that sentiment resonates deeply. The technical challenges of lunar exploration remain formidable, regardless of which approach prevails. Space remains an unforgiving environment that punishes the slightest miscalculation. But as we weigh the competing visions for humanity's return to the moon, one thing becomes clear. The barriers we face are less about technical capability and more about institutional will, funding priorities, and the courage to embrace new approaches. As we stand at this crossroads in human spaceflight, the contrast couldn't be clearer. NASA's traditional approach has delivered remarkable achievements, but now struggles with mounting costs and delays. Meanwhile, SpaceX continues to redefine what's possible through innovation and bold engineering. Whether it's a modified Crew Dragon or the revolutionary Starship, SpaceX's commercial approach offers a compelling alternative to NASA's SLS. The question isn't whether we'll return to the moon, but who will take us there, and how quickly, safely, and cost-effectively they can do it. In the grand scheme of human exploration, what matters most isn't which agency or company plants the next boot prints on lunar soil. What matters is that we go, that we extend humanity's reach beyond Earth and build a sustainable presence on other worlds. The technology exists. The capability exists. All that's missing is the alignment of political will, funding priorities, and institutional courage to embrace the most effective path forward. If you found this analysis valuable, I'd appreciate your support. Hit the like button, share this video with fellow space enthusiasts, and leave a comment with your thoughts on SpaceX's role in lunar exploration. This is Elon Musk 24 Hours, bringing you the latest developments in space innovation and exploration. Subscribe now to stay informed about the companies and technologies shaping humanity's future among the stars. Until next time, keep looking up.